Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and you know what? I recently did a stream on Comics Aficionados breaking down, the Dan DiDio firing and some of the implications, and then uh, yesterday I did a video on Dan DiDio and my thoughts on the situation, maybe somewhere or some of the places DC Comics might be going forward. But not everyone agrees, with my take on the situation, and so today I wanted to bring on another YouTuber who has a kind of a different perspective on Dan Didio and his performance at DC Comics. Robert from StarCraft YouTube. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. Yourself?
I'm doing excellent. I'm glad you're joining me. We bumped heads in the past talking about the direction of DC Comics and the performance of Dan Didio as the co-publisher CCO. I think that I think that Dan Didio's issue was that he was always trying to recreate, the Watchmen type of story in DC Comics or Dark Knight Returns, that deconstruction, really dark story. And, it took over a lot of his initiatives. New 52 was wildly popular, when it initially happened. DC Comics fans and readers really liked that idea. They wanted a more streamlined DC universe where things made more sense. It wasn't quite as confusing as far as continuity, but I applaud Dan Didio for that initiative because it worked initially and people were really excited. But to me, it's always comes down to the execution under his leadership as far as an event like that, and it really fell apart when the characters they just lost. The DC writers lost the essence of the characters. The characters lost the core of who they were, and they kind of all became assholes during the New 52.
I won't argue that part. And I think my thing with Dan is that, like I've said this before on my streams, all that stuff. My big starting for comics started with around the time of Infinite Crisis, which is the early days of Dan's tenure. So I've seen so many of these dark events, and for me, so many of them. Whenever I see people complain about them, I'd be more looking at how did we get to these events, and more times than not, a lot of these events were built up to. So I accepted it, saying that felt natural. I didn't think much about the darkness at the time. And I think that's been Dan's luck, you could say, is that he had good writers who knew how to handle and lead up to the darkness where the darkness made sense. Then, of course, you have it be once you got to New 52 when he started to spread that darkness all across the board. That's when it became a crapshoot of depending on the creators involved and everything. But when you look at Jeff Johns, Grant Morrison, some of the others, those were times where, or even, actually, I guess you could say one could have said they could have noticed it with, what was Countdown. Countdown was definitely one of those rough times, but even then you could scrape on by. But yeah, it feels like with Dan, it became with New 52 more apparent of his darkness. And even then, there were some books I could still accept, like Scott Snyder's Batman, Jeff Johns on Justice League. But I think even with New 50, the Future's End and all that stuff, and then eventually was after Rebirth was Heroes in Crisis, were the two big examples I could think of, like, what the hell is Dan wanting? But, yeah, so again, I will not ever argue any of those things. For me, though, I could accept a lot of the darkness, but even I admit Dan was pushing his luck with me in the more recent stuff to the point where I started feeling more like I'm less defending the man himself, and I'm more defending the position that I don't want it given to some woke person.
Yeah, see, you might be accepting of change, but you're nervous that maybe they bring in an Axel Alonso or maybe they promote up Bendis, and you have an entire new bag of issues at DC Comics moving forward.
Yeah, but currently, though, I am not afraid because I do think at&t, like from what I've been hearing from other people around lately, want to keep to the core of the characters. And that means whoever they replace, if they put an Alonso in there, they're not going to last long at all. And so, yeah.
So, another one of the things that I always noticed, I think it was quite apparent. We saw the Dan Didio hit list, and on there it was a ton of legacy characters. He wanted to get rid of, Nightwing, Wally West, there's Superman's marriage. Like, what a weird thing to have at the top of your list.
Oh, and yeah.
He really had it out for legacy characters, and a lot of those, I personally love.
I personally saw those as he wasn't so much against the legacy characters so much as he wanted to go back to the characters he wanted. At least when it came to Green Lantern and Flash and all that, and Robin, which, to be fair, I do recall that he has openly stated how, now this could have been just damage control on his reputation, but there were times where he wore a Nightwing shirt and said, "Hey, you all converted me," and he basically openly admitted he made some mistakes. Again, he could have been BSing. Who can really say? But stuff like that. He doesn't even have a problem with Wally, but you got to also remember he's also the guy who let Jeff Johns do all those legacy characters with Justice Society of America, where the whole team was legacies. So I think it all depends on what legacies he has a problem with, from my opinion, anyway.
Well, he wiped out the entire JSA with the New 52, though.
That's true, but to be fair, and I go over this in a recent video of mine, if you really want to do the whole Superman was the first hero, you have to sacrifice all the pre-Superman stuff, including the JSA. And that has been my biggest beef I've had with people complaining about this generation thing seems to negate Doomsday Clock or Wonder Woman being the first hero, when it's like, not really, because it actually plays up with what Doomsday Clock set up. Now again, that's more Jeff Johns is doing, but at the same time, I think you get what I'm saying, right? You can't have it both ways, where Superman's the first hero, but you have legacies.
Well, I think with Jeff Johns and Doomsday Clock set up, and we'll talk about Rebirth now, because that's a big reason why I think Dan DiDio really lost his way even after New 52 was Superman isn't the first hero, but his arrival on Earth is the start of the DC multiverse or the metaverse, however you want to claim it. Like his arrival inspires the world, and
the new age.
Yes, that's so. No matter when he arrives, whether it be 1940 or 1985, that is always the beginning. He is the alpha. Is that the way I took it as far as Doomsday Clock? And I just love that series. And
I did too. I adored it.
It kind of like breaks my heart that they didn't go along with it, because when they finally realized that New 52, it's not going to work. We need a reset. They let Jeff Johns have creative control, and it feels like the DC creative teams, they found the essence of the characters, what we all loved about Wally West or Hal Jordan or Superman. They fixed all these issues, and a lot of people were back in love with DC Comics again. You had that beautiful, hopeful universe that just really separated it from Marvel and some of the other connected universes out there, and it was really humming along. And then all of a sudden, Jeff Johns has got Doomsday Clock going on, but he starts moving over and doing more stuff with DCEU films and stuff like that. So the CCO title goes back over to Dan DiDio, and he decides to creep it back over the New 52 era or the New 52 direction, more Watchmen, more Dark Knight Returns kind of ambiance and feel of the universe. When Dark Knight's Metal hit, and it hit big. And I give kudos to Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. That's a wonderful event. People love that. I just wish it would have been, Elseworlds. I wish it wasn't in continuity, but it really felt like DiDio decided to take that opportunity and change the direction of Rebirth, kind of just end it right there, let Doomsday Clock continue on, but not really be stayed true to what John's vision was. And then, of course, he brought in Bendis, and it felt like
Bendis. Yeah, don't get me started on Bendis. Oh boy.
Yeah, it just feels like DC Comics really lost away, and it kind of felt like enough is enough for me. And it was like, why is DiDio still here? He does this every time. They get a good reboot, they get a good resetting point, and he loses his way.
Yeah, no kidding. Did you lose me for a second?
No, I think I accidentally interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. As I was saying, it was Bendis. But again, with Doomsday Clock, I think, because I always remember this, and I'm one of those who remembers this, is that, now I'm just saying this because, because you kind of went on, I was trying to recorrect my earlier point. With Superman, you remember post-Crisis, right? How eventually they changed it where he was hero of the present day?
Mm-hmm.
Eventually they had it be where, they had to be, you still had to be Jay Garrick, for example, not Jay Garrick, Alan Scott was the Superman of the Golden Age, because of how powerful he was. And I just want to say that out of the way, that was something that I always felt they brought back. But yeah, I do agree with what you're saying, though, about with Dan, is that he does these reboots and everything, and it's like, there's been more reboots under his tenure than anyone else. And I always have to wonder how much of it was him because of his doing, how much of it was because of panic from higher ups and what higher ups could do. You always got to wonder what that is. But I will say this, sticking with, Rebirth, the biggest problem I ever had was Heroes in Crisis. Because that just felt like, okay, this is interesting. Where are they going? You get to the last few issues and you're like, what the hell? Then you find out it was editorially driven and they were given a hit list. It was like, okay, why? What was the point? What was the point of all this?
Yeah, you find out in the end that Tom King had an outline of what his story was, and then the editors decided what heroes they were going to ruin.
Exactly. And it felt like, again, what was even the point? Because these were, like, the outlines, like, did they really... To be fair, I could think of some other lesser characters they could have put in there. And I do applaud, actually, Tom King for coming up with some of the pre-New 52 characters. Granted, I don't like how they died off, but at least you're like, some of them made sense, like Lagoon Boy. But, referencing Teen Titans East, which was the last thing we ever saw with the poor guy. But, again, it just felt like, what was the point of all this? And I know people want to complain about Tom King on Batman and everything. That was all under DiDio's watch. I'm always saying that the ending ruined the whole run, for me. But there was still, for a brief time, stuff I really liked about it. But now you find out, it was Editorial that wanted Alfred to stay dead. What the fuck?
Yeah, it sounded like Tom King wasn't very happy there at the end, but
which I'm like, okay, dude, I get it. You were given a raw deal there, because I still remember how I defended that moment, saying it doesn't look like it was this was meant to be, like Alpha's supposed to be dead, and sure
definitely
enough,
not.
It wasn't.
Yeah, there was no build up to the scene. It just happened, and you could tell like it was meant to
be Psychopirate,
mentally scar Damien and give you a cliffhanger, but then you were going to find out Psychopirate did that. And Alfred really was alive, because that's what the text, that's what you learn afterwards when Bruce is in Hawaii. He's like, he's safe. He's out of the city.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, and then they had to retcon, saying, I lied.
Yeah. I'm not happy with how Tom King did that. And, after the wedding fiasco, I think Tom King's Batman just went off the rails and really never came back. There was one good story arc where it was like 12 Angry Men that was okay, but then they destroyed Nightwing, and yeah, that was pretty okay. They destroyed Nightwing. The Nightmare story arc is one of the worst things I've ever read in my life. But
the Nightmare one,
this isn't a Tom King video. We're here to talk about
right. It still ties into. It ties into DiDio, though, since that was under his watch.
Mm-hmm. But so here we are. Dan DiDio, is no longer the co-publisher and CCO of DC Comics. He has been let go. We had wildly different opinions on Dan DiDio's tenure and his stewardship of DC Comics. I will say this: he was a good leader in the fact that he stood up for his people. He did a good job, and he made them feel like he was there. He was there to go to bat for them, and he was always willing to take a bullet for his creators, which I find admirable. So I do think his leadership was good in that respect. But as far as the execution and the creative direction of DC, I do think he was a failure. But what are your thoughts about aspiring and moving forward? Are you cautiously optimistic? Are you still a naysayer? Are you upset that he's gone?
Well, one other point I wanted to make was also under his tenure, we still had, despite what people might think, an emphasis on the characters for the most part. He might have wanted to make it his own direction, but we still have more influence over characters rather than politics, unlike Marvel, which is also one of my biggest defense of the man. But now with at&t wanting to stick to the core, I feel like anyone could be in a better spot than Dan. So where it stands now, I feel like we are in good suggestions or good, things were happened under his tenure that I don't think is going to happen anymore under a more safer hands. So who knows? We might never get another Death Knight Metal or a Blackest Night going forward. I hope we can, but
Well,
who
I
can
do too.
say?
Blackest Night's one of my favorite comic events of all time. That
Yeah,
thing is
but
great.
let's be kind. If you're gonna have a company that's gonna want to play it safe, you're never gonna get that again.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dan definitely didn't play it safe. I have to give him that. He wasn't someone to go and play it safe. He definitely took a lot of chances. I don't think that he listened to his customers enough. I think that was ultimately his downfall. And I do believe that he gave Bendis too much influence when he came over. I mean, that was the other fatal blow.
And let's be honest, it's because of him that they lost Hickman because they brought Bendis in. That I won't forgive him for. If the fact that he thought Bendis was a better grab than Hickman, what the hell?
Yeah, that's strange. Of course, Hickman, was his mentor was Bendis, but he's certainly far surpassed him. Is certainly in current day capability as far as
he can't stand Bendis anymore. He can't stand Bendis anymore.
He jabs him from time to time. Yeah. What did he tell?
Well, because look at how many times
I'm always taking his crumbs and making meals out of them.
Well, look how many times he would do a big change, and then Bendis would stealthily retcon it back to what it used to be. I don't blame him.
Yeah. That's a video for another time, because Bendis is doing that at DC Comics with other creators. But
I would love to join in on that one.
So just some final thoughts. We definitely disagreed on the state of DC Comics not too long ago, but I'm happy for the change. I think this is going to be for the better, and I think DC is going to have a brighter future because of it. What are your feelings? Just in general moving forward.
I agree the same way. I feel things are going to be better going forward. I think this is a change that needed to happen, and again, with at&t want to stick to the core characters. I think that's what we are in much better protection, a protection bubble, than if it was Warner Brothers, who would just toss anyone in there and be like, go ahead, whatever.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, Robert, I would want to say...
you
cut out, my bad.
One quick question before we wrap up.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you stand on Dan DiDio as a writer?
Well, I don't think he's a very good writer. He's certainly not a good Spider-Man writer. Although that... his Spider-Man knockoff was good for 2 issues, and then I didn't like it.
Right. Well, what about... you mean Sideways?
Yeah.
I like that, but his Metal Men I've been loving.
I haven't been reading that. I haven't really been reading much DC. As soon as they did this Year of the Villain thing, I actually dropped all my DC ongoings. I've been reading Black Label and some comics that I review for the channel. But, yeah, I've been reading way more Marvel.
All right. Just wanted to ask that question out of the way, since when else are we going to bring up his writing?
Well, maybe we'll do that another day. Robert, thank you very much for joining me, giving your perspective on Dan DiDio. I know we disagreed on a lot of his choices and everything, but I really respect your opinion. I appreciate you coming on and letting my viewers know what your thoughts on were. We're on it.
Yep, no problem. Thank you for having me.
All right, Salamapo, and I'm out.